If Canada wants to be hesitant, they can do that. If you don't want to sign an agreement with us, we understand.
What nobody is talking about is the third partner in this agreement, Mexico. So we ask the question, what is Mexico saying? Here's what they said. Mark Carney promised Canadians he was the person who could manage Donald Trump and protect Canada's economy. But with a major trade deadline approaching, the U.S. ambassador is now saying Canada and the United States are, quote, not anywhere close, end quote, to even a framework or interim agreement. And that lines up with what we've been hearing from business leaders in manufacturing who say Washington appears to be waiting on Canada. The reason for that, we've learned, has been confirmed by the Mexican Secretary of Economy. Let's take a look.
We are not far away from a very significant deadline when it comes to the trade agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Do you, sir, have a gut feeling as to what will happen on July 1st?
I don't think, obviously, we're not anywhere close to announcing any type of a framework or an interim agreement. I really think it's in the hands now on our side. It's going to be the president, and I'm assuming on the Canadian side it will be the Prime Minister to determine what the next steps are and directionally where we're headed.
So you represent the president. The last comments that we heard from him were kind of on the sidelines toward the end of the G7, in which he expressed, I view it as possibly expiring immediately, but he also said later on in the comments that he could end up signing it. Do you have any clarity, or has the president conveyed to you with any clarity what his position at this moment in time on CUSMA is?
We will let the president outline with clarity exactly where he is when he's ready and prepared to make an announcement.
And could that be in advance of July 1st, or do we have any idea on timing of that?
It could be in advance of July 1, or it could be sometime in July. I don't think it will go into August, but I've been wrong before, and I could be wrong again.
Do you have the impression that the White House wants to get to a deal, wants CUSMA to stick around?
Well, I mean, we were very willing. We were actually kind of excited about the deal that we had in October, where we covered 5 critical areas. We covered oil, we covered uranium, auto parts, steel, and aluminum. That's a pretty good deal. We were excited about that. The president was excited about it. I was in the October 7 meeting at the White House where, the president, his team, and Prime Minister Carney and his team, reached an agreement fairly quickly at 30,000 feet. This is what we're going to do. This is what we want to do on steel. This is what we want to do on oil. That would have been awesome. It really would have put the following 7 months on very, very solid footing and say, okay, now let's start filling in the other parts. But as we all know, that didn't happen.
And so how would you describe, I know for a few months after that, you were descriptive of the status of negotiations as lacking, right? That basically things fell apart and nothing really got restarted in an official capacity. And I'm wondering if you could offer some clarity to me, who has asked many ministers for clarity from their perspective, because what we do see on the USTR's website, for example, is official dates for talking with Mexico. We know a couple of those meetings have already occurred. You don't see the same when it comes to bilateral meetings between Canada and the United States. But at the same time, we do see Jameson Greer, the USTR, and Minister LeBlanc engaged in conversations at different points. How would you describe the status of talks between Canada and the United States right now?
All right, I want to jump in here for a little bit. So Hoekstra is sitting there saying that we're not anywhere close to a framework. And that framework is necessary to have Canada, Mexico, and the US at the table talking, right? Because you can't renew the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement with only 2 parties. Now, Vashi just said something really important there. And you might miss it if you weren't really paying attention to it, because it seems like something that is relatively unimportant, but it actually is important. So what she's talking about is the fact that the Mexican government has been extremely transparent of what is happening over the course of the CUSMA negotiations, or USMCA, or whatever you want to, however you want to rearrange the acronym. And this is what she's talking about. So the government of Mexico has a website where they're actually posting updates on what happens during this process. So this has been translated from Spanish into English, and it says Mexico and the United States announced the next steps in bilateral discussions ahead of joint review of USMCA. And you can see this was posted on March 18th, 2026. Here's another one. May 27th, 2026. Mexico and the United States hold first bilateral round of negotiations toward the joint review of USMCA. Here's one 2 days later. Mexico and the United States conclude the first formal round of the USMCA review with positive outcome. Here's one on June 18th. Mexican Ministry of Economy and Office of the United States Trade Representative. And it goes on to say that they've had additional talks and they've had a second round of bilateral negotiations and they're moving forward. This is what Canada has, folks. So according, if you go by the same standard, Canada on June 30th, 2025, didn't talk to the United States. We talked to our own committee. On November 24th, 2025, we didn't talk to the United States. We talked with our own committee. December 16th, 2025, there was a joint statement from the fourth meeting of the Environment Committee. Well, that's great. May 26th, 2026, Minister LeBlanc meets with provincial and territorial trade ministers to discuss Canada-US trade agreement. Well, that's nice. He's talking to them. He's not talking to the United States. June 1st, Canada's recommendations for joint review of Canada-US trade agreement. Okay, that's fine. June 3rd, statement of Minister LeBlanc on proposed Section 301 tariffs. If you trust the government, they haven't met with the US at all. According to that. That's the site that is giving us updates on CUSMA or USMCA. Meanwhile, the Mexican site, it's release after release after release. Here we had a meeting. This is what we talked about. We're moving on. Here we had a meeting. This is what we talked about. We're moving on. This government is supposed to be all about transparency. This government, headed by Mark Carney, is supposed to be the organized, sophisticated banker, the economist. How is it that Gloria Sheinbaum's government down in Mexico is supposedly more organized, more transparent, and seems to be more interested in agreement than Canada? That's the question. Anyway, we'll get back to the Mexican officials in a second.
I think, like we started off with, we're not at a point where we believe that we're close to even announcing a framework or an interim agreement. I think the next discussion, again, has to be a discussion between potentially the president and the prime minister in terms of where we're headed, or you'll see the president come out, and you could see the prime minister come out and just make a statement as to this is where we see it going, and this is the direction that I've given to my team.
So if 7 months ago the possibility, like the 10,000 foot view of what is possible was possible, why is it not possible to arrive at the same at a similar 10,000 foot point of view right now?
I don't think, on a Canadian part, I don't think folks recognize the impact of what happened in October and November. The president and the prime minister, I think they really believe leaving on October 7th. We've got a framework for an agreement here. We just need our teams to go back and fill it out a little bit. And that was the perception, that we were well on our way to making that happen. I think the prime minister has even said that it was very, very close to having an agreement. And then, poof, it's all gone. And, so that, I think, raises lots of questions about, how do we get back there? A lot of people were speculating, well, when do the talks get back on track? They'll get back on track after a month. We'll get over it. I thought it would take a little bit longer. I said, you'll go into the first quarter of 26, and I could see it happening. In reality, they've never gotten back on track the same way that we've had progress with the Mexicans on getting to an agreement.
I guess, Ambassador, what I'm trying to determine is why. Because, and I know the reason identified by the president at the time, and there's debate about that, but was around this Ronald Reagan ad put forth by the Premier of Ontario. The Prime Minister apologized for that, right? The Prime Minister criticized, in essence, the Premier for doing that. He represents the federal government. Why was that not enough to re-embark, or at least at this point, all these months later, sort of enter into this with the goodwill that existed 7 months ago?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the discussions have been going back and forth at every one of the meetings, early on when the President and the Prime Minister met. Right after the Prime Minister got elected, I think it was within 2 weeks, he was at the White House. They met again at Kananaskis, and then we met on October 7. I don't know, the detailed discussions, but in every one of those meetings, as the meeting came to a close, the President would say, make us an offer. Make us an offer. Obviously, at the third meeting there, you made an offer. The Prime Minister came in prepared, and we basically accepted that offer and said, yeah, let's move forward. My gut feel on this is that maybe perhaps there wasn't an offer that was enticing enough to really say, okay, yeah, this is really, really good. Let's go back and let's work these things out.
I have questioned many federal ministers about the efforts to diversify, the challenges previously, and the challenges that presents right now. But you framed the initial comment there around, taking issue with the fact that it's being described as a rupture. But you want us to refer to the comments from the president, for example, or the way in which he's described this country as simply noise. I'm presenting to you just like when you're wondering why there might be some hesitation not to further integration or make that sales pitch in the way you describe it, that perhaps is part of it, that part of the responsibility and the onus, the burden of that lies not just with Canada, but specifically with the president who decided to take aim at your close friend and neighbor.
We did not take aim at Canada.
Those statements are not taking aim, with all due respect, Ambassador.
Take a look at your economic, we put tariffs on every country in the world. We did not take aim at Canada. We took a policy that we were implementing on a global basis that we believed we had to put in place to keep America strong and prosperous. So, there were only two countries that responded in a strongly negative way. Okay? The rest of the world, we've negotiated trade agreements, we've worked on frameworks and those types of things. We did not take aim at Canada.
So this is an interesting discussion that's going on here. And I see both sides. As a Canadian, I think it hurts Canada to put tariffs on Canada. I don't think that's right, especially when we're a very close trading partner. But I also understand that Mark Carney has been trying to poke Donald Trump in the eye to garner support this whole time. This whole time. But he's been flip-flopping back and forth, dropping tariffs, threatening more, praising the president, coming back, insulting the president. Now, Donald Trump isn't innocent here. Donald Trump keeps talking about, the 51st state and at some point, maybe we'll take over Canada, that sort of thing. So, he does the same thing. But again, let's not pretend that Canada's innocent here. How do you almost have an agreement, and then you go to Davos and you insult the country that you're trying to get an agreement with? How do you do that? That's the strategy of a master negotiator? If you take what Hoekstra says at face value, the U.S. has been essentially saying to Canada, make an offer and let's see it. And on the offer, they said, that's pretty good. That's pretty close. Let's continue working on that. And then Sounds like Canada took the offer off the table. So I don't know if I buy this whole, Trump was mad about the Reagan ad and then pulled it. I don't know. The truth is always somewhere in the middle, right? The United States is going to say what it's going to say in order to try and sway public opinion. Canada's going to say what it's going to say. Carney didn't seem to be too bothered that they almost had a deal. Not at all. It's interesting that as the Conservatives started to climb in the polls, and there was even a poll in the fall that had the Conservatives with a majority, right? You remember that? All of a sudden, Carney pokes Trump in the eye in order to try to rouse the mainstream media and Canadian patriotism again, to get angry at the US. This is what's happening. So I think that's very curious, given the timing on this and everything else.
Really? And I ask with great respect, because yes, you did apply tariffs to other countries, but you initially applied 232 fentanyl-associated tariffs to Canada. And wherein the president, did not refer to every other country in the way that, as I cataloged, he has referred to Canada. I understand that you're upset with the response that Canada made.
I'm not upset. It doesn't bother me.
Okay, you don't view the response from Canada positively. But from where I sit, it seems like you're frustrated with the idea that when Canada got punched, they didn't just lay there.
That, Canada can have whatever response it wants. Okay, we are willing to do business with Canada. The president has made that clear. He embraced the agreement back in October for 5 huge sectors of this economy, saying we were willing to invest, we were willing to cooperate and create a framework that we thought would be good for America and we thought would be good for Canada, and that we would then take that and expand it to other sectors of a total agreement. And, but if Canada wants to be hesitant, they can do that. But the other message that we send is very positive. We recognize the needs we have. Okay, we need critical minerals. We've indicated to Canada, we think you're very much a natural partner. You're close by, you have lots of these, but if you don't want to sign an agreement with us, we understand.
This is a key part. Like, listen to what he's saying. It's positioned as the United States side is like, listen, like we're here. We're here. When are you coming back? Mark Carney and the Liberals, they want to frame this as, well, we almost had a deal, and then, we ran an ad, or Ford ran an ad, and Trump got mad and tore it up and then got mad at Canada and all of this stuff. And now they won't talk to us. Meanwhile, you have the ambassador of the United States, who's assigned to Canada, saying, listen, if you guys are hesitant, you don't want to sign this, then we're not going to sign it. You have Catherine Swift of the CCNBC. And she's saying what she's hearing from all of her U.S. contacts is the only offers that are coming forward from Canada are unserious offers. You have people that we've spoken to today, and we're going to be putting out a video about this tomorrow. We've spoken to business owners in the mold, tool, and die industries. And what they are hearing is that Canada hasn't shown up to these negotiations. Now, here's the magic part about this. You can look at Hoekstra and say, you know what, he's the U.S. Of course he's going to say that. Fine. Let's accept that argument. You have the Canadians. They're saying, well, the U.S. is, they're not showing up and they're not willing and they're not acting in good faith. Okay, let's put that over there. Canadian business owners, they're caught in the middle. I tend to believe them a little bit more, but for the sake of argument, let's put them over here. What nobody is talking about is the third partner in this agreement, Mexico. So we ask the question, what is Mexico saying? Here's what they said. Ladies and gentlemen, this is from the Mexican mainstream media. Okay, this is not Canadian, this is not American, this is Mexican. Translated from Spanish to English. USMCA trade ministers plan trilateral meeting on July 1st. Economy Secretary Marcelo Ebrard, this is the Mexican Secretary of the Economy, said the meeting will include representatives from all three countries after Canada was absent from the preparatory negotiations. This is the Mexican Secretary of the Economy saying this. This is huge. The trade ministers of Mexico, the United States, and Canada are planning a meeting on July 1st for a joint review of the trade agreement they are part of, USMCA, Economy Secretary Marcelo Ebrard reported. However, Ebrard said he could confirm this after meeting with the U.S. counterpart, Jameson Greer, this Thursday in Washington or later once he returns to Mexico. Dominic LeBlanc, Canada's minister responsible for Canada-United States trade and intergovernmental affairs, has been absent from preparatory negotiations to define the course of USMCA. Here's another one. Again, Mexican mainstream media. The current USMCA negotiations will be more difficult than the previous ones. Ebrard. Still no date set for Canada's integration. This is from May. Ebrard assures that Mexico will take a very solid position in the second round of negotiations in mid-June. Later in the article, he stated that currently, quote, we are in a formal conversation, end quote, in which the United States and Mexico are participating, and quote, hopefully tomorrow we will get Canada to participate as well, end quote. When asked directly about the integration of the Canadians, he commented that they don't know when it will happen and added, quote, I'll be able to answer that on the 16th or 17th of June because we'll be there in Washington. We would very much like, of course, for Canada to join the talks as soon as possible. We've made that clear. And well, it depends on the discussions between both countries, Canada and the United States, to see how this will be resolved, end quote. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Mexicans who have no skin in the game between the spat between Canada and the United States. They're saying Canada hasn't been there. And we're led to believe that Dominic LeBlanc is, chatting about this and trying to get things done. Where is he? Because according to the Mexicans, he hasn't been there. So what the heck have you been doing? This completely reframes what Ambassador Pete Hoekstra is saying. I'm not looking to agree with Ambassador Hoekstra because I'm anti-Canadian. We follow the facts on Northern Perspective. And here we have the Canadian, the CCMBC, Canadian Coalition of Manufacturers, and we have business leaders from the Canadian mold tool and die industry, and we have the Mexican Secretary of the Economy. They're all saying the same thing. Canada has not been there, and when they were, the offers they're putting forward are not serious. And let's go back to this. Let's assume that the ad was the reason that talks fell apart. Mark Carney knew that the ad was coming. So if he knew that ad was coming and they had a high-level agreement already in place with the United States on CUSMA back then, why would Mark Carney not tell Ford, listen, you're going to screw everything up. We already have a high-level agreement. Stow it. This puts a whole different spin and validates what a lot of Canadians have been thinking, that Mark Carney doesn't really want an agreement with CUSMA. But this information right here from the Mexican media, this blows the roof off of this whole thing. When it comes to the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement, one thing has become very, very clear. And you don't have to be pro or anti-Canada, pro or anti-US to be able to realize it. Because we now have third-party Mexican confirmation that Canada has not been at the table at all.